Hi everyone. So, today I thought I would talk a bit about the information metabolism elements, or what are more commonly known as the cognitive functions. Now, I feel that a lot of people, actually I'd say probably around 99% of people who have any idea what cognitive functions even are, I think 99% of them probably are quite mistaken over what they actually are about and what the right definitions would be. Now, the reason I think this is that I think there are a lot of bad definitions going around. I think a lot of people don't really have the theoretical infrastructure to really understand these concepts properly. And so they come up with all sorts of different sorts of definitions, some of them vapid and inane, some of them just vague and just impossible to really apply or understand. What I really like about socionics is that it gives clear, precise definitions for things. And it works out by adding and causing different dichotomies to interact. It works out very nuanced, very both rich and complex understandings of each kind of what we call an information metabolism element, what people tend to call cognitive functions. And the idea of cognitive functions is that they're not just an action like experiencing or imagining, they are rather a mix of both a fundamental category of existence, a fluid intelligence that someone can learn, adapt, and apply, and a philosophy of life. So, first of all, I should say that extroverted sensation, extroverted sensing, as people tend to call it, is not simply experiencing. Otherwise, we'd all be ESFPs or ESTPs. I can experience lots of things. I experienced sardines in my pasta this evening, which my wife thought was quite disgusting. But that is experiencing. So no, that's not the point. If that were the case, if extrovert sensation were experiencing, and for some reason, some four function theory, people think you can only use four functions. So yeah, suddenly, if I were as an ENTP, who according to the four function theory, I don't have extrovert sensation according to them, I can't experience things. Or I must be deluded in thinking I'm experiencing things. Maybe I'm putting together extrovert intuition, introvert sensation together to create some sort of fake pseudo experience. It's all nonsense. Absolute nonsense. So instead, extroverted sensation, let's break down what it actually is. So, first of all, extroverted sensation is a kind of sensation. But what is sensation? Well, sensation is a kind of perception. Now, what is a perception? Well, to understand what a perception is, we need to go back to this Scottish philosopher called David Hume. Now, David Hume had lots of different ideas, lots of writings, very, very interesting stuff. But one of his greatest contributions, in my opinion, is the is-ought problem. Now, what is the is-ought problem? It is basically him saying you cannot reach an ought, in other words, a should be, from an is. You can't derive what ought to be simply from how things are. That essentially articulated the key difference between the main two families of information in our existence: descriptive information and prescriptive information. Information that simply describes what things are, could be, will be, has been, and information that tells you what ought to be, how it's supposed to be, what is correct, what is incorrect. They're two different things. Never the twain shall meet. Now, so you have perception. Within perception, you have intuition and sensation. We're talking about sensation at the moment. So sensation is the kind of perception that is both external and involved. What do those things mean? So external is information, and this is something which it is something which Jung thought about but didn't place correctly. See, Jung was the first person to coin these ideas. There's no expectation that the originator of a set of ideas is going to be the master of them. They simply are the first person to think about them. In the same way that Homo habilis was the first hominid to use tools, supposedly. Doesn't mean they are the master of tools. Homo sapiens is far better using tools than Homo habilis. But analogy applies. So, what Jung was thinking about for external and internal, he called extroverted, introverted. That extroverted, introverted is actually something quite different. And Jung conflating external, internal with extroverted, introverted actually is the cause of most of the problems in regular JCF, Myers-Briggsy people in terms of their understanding of the cognitive functions or information metabolism elements. It's the key. It is like the place where it all went wrong. So putting it right, extrovert, introvert is one thing. External, internal is the meaningful thing here. And so sensation is perception that is external. So what is external? External is anything which is outside of us, essentially. It is stuff which you can see and I can see as well because it's not in my head. It is here. It is behind me. It is around me. It's in your room. It's on the screen you're looking at. I can see right in front of me right now my fat face, right? That is external information, okay? And you can see it too. What joy. So, yeah, that's external information. It's not internal information. That's the opposite. Internal information has to be interpreted, reinterpreted for me to communicate it to you. I don't have to interpret or reinterpret external information to communicate it to you. You see it as it is. That is external information. So the other thing is involved information. What is involved information? Well, it's simply information that you feel. You can feel it emotionally, you can feel it physically. In this case, you feel it physically. Why? Well, if I were to take this remote and whack myself over the head, I would feel that. If I were to whack someone else over the head if they were asleep, they'd probably wake up. Maybe they won't. Maybe it's too strong and maybe it actually knocked them out while they were asleep. And that's an interesting thing. If someone's actually asleep but also gets knocked out, does that mean that I cause them to lose consciousness, or are they already unconscious? Would that increase the length of sleep? What if... Oh, no, tangent. But anyway, the idea is that I feel that. Involved information is something you feel. And detached, the opposite of that, is information you don't feel. So sensation is information that's external and involved. Things which are in the world around us, we can see it, we don't have to reinterpret it to see it, we can directly share it as it is, and also we feel it. We experience it as vivacious to us. That's sensation. Now we get to extroverted sensation. So what is extroverted sensation? What I like to call the sensation of force. Well, another two dichotomies here, extroverted and introverted. Now this is the proper definition, not Jung's idea. Jung was still trying to figure this stuff out. So extroverted is turning outwards. Literally means turning outwards. What does that mean? So it is essentially an orientation towards sensation that is accumulative, that is about expanding quantity, not about refining quality. So we're talking about the accumulation of sensations, more and more and more and more and more sensations. And as opposed to introverted, which would be the refining of sensations, to narrow down the numbers of sensations. So that's the first part. The second part is static, as opposed to dynamics. What is static? Static is the idea that the information we're perceiving, whatever it is distinct in its parts from other parts. In other words, when you take this remote controller, that is a different remote controller to this remote controller. They are two separate things. This one is, a bit curvy in it. This one's a bit flat. If this one were to cease to be like this and become more like this, it would not be this anymore. It would be more like this. It would be a different object. Objects are distinct. We are talking about sensory objects, so things which are distinct from one another. Okay, and the idea that we are accumulating these sensory objects which are distinct from one another. Now, you put these things together, what do you have? You have a category of reality, the physical objects. And the thing about physical objects is that they, simply by having physical extension, by taking up space, essentially, they deprive other objects from taking up the same space. There's an inherent competition between physical objects over space. This is simply part of the electromagnetism force, which is a fundamental force of our universe. One atom and another atom can't occupy the same space. They will push each other away. Atoms have this repulsive effect on other atoms. In the same way, if I were to take this glass of water, and the Greek inventor Archimedes recognized or first noticed the very same thing when he was in the Greek baths, as I place my fist into this glass of water, you'll see what happens. The water rises. Why does the water rise? Well, it rises because my fist is more dense than that water. So the water can't sit there anymore. It has to move out of the way for my fist. Same principle applies to animals in the savannah. A hyena has just killed an antelope, right? It has jumped on the antelope, it has wrestled it to the ground, it has bitten its neck, it has caused it to die, right? The hyena is tougher than the antelope. But suddenly, a lion comes out of the bush and chases off the hyena. Why does it chase off the hyena? Because the lion is stronger than the hyena. The lion is tougher than the hyena. And the hyena will not want to occupy the same space as that lion. It will be killed if it's not careful. So, the stronger, denser life form chases away the weaker, less dense life form. This also applies to humans. Some humans are bigger, they are stronger, they are tougher, they have more willpower, they have more resources, more wealth, more connections, more things that give them the ability to get what they want, and by taking what they want, someone else loses out. Someone else misses out on the prize. This is the world of the battling of wills in the same way as physical objects battle for space. This is the fundamental idea of extroverted sensation. That you, if you are an extroverted sensation-oriented type, in your desire to accumulate as many objects as possible, to have the maximum impact and control and possession over your space by taking as many objects as you can, that you are going to be in competition with others. And if you are mightier than others, you will win and you will take more. That is the idea of extroverted sensation. So nothing to do with experiencing simply for the sake of experiencing. When you think of extroverted sensation, don't think of some sort of hippie going, yeah, my magical mushroom is rad, man. Don't do that. Don't think about extroverted sensation in that way. Think of the previous president of the United States, Donald Trump. Very clear example of extroverted sensation. Someone who knew what he wanted and went out and got it through sheer toughness and a sort of devil-may-care, blasé, action-orientedness. That's extroverted sensation, and you can see it all the way through history. Look at Winston Churchill as an example. Look at Napoleon Bonaparte as another example. Look at Alexander the Great, or Julius Caesar, or Cyrus the Great, or even some more negative examples like a Benito Mussolini, or perhaps an Attila the Hun, or Genghis Khan. He certainly got what he wanted much of the time. That is extroverted sensation. It is a tough, it is often a brutal approach to life. It can also be a heroic approach to life. It can be that which protects the weak because it is strong and it is able to fend off other people who would take from it. But this is extroverted sensation. It is the spirit of the warrior, not the spirit of the hedonist.
Hi, if you're enjoying this video, you'll love the in-depth content found on the Type Mastery Pathway, our comprehensive course. Learn everything I know about socionics in over 20 hours of video lectures across 6 modules, with over 100 video examples. Sign up today by clicking the link in the description below.
Introverted sensation, the cognitive function that Carl Jung mucked up. Yep, you're right, I did say it. He mucked it up. He totally mucked it up. If you read Jung's psychological types, if you investigate what he writes about the introverted sensing type, you'll find someone who sounds like they ought to be in a lunatic asylum. And that's not entirely surprising, given that Carl Jung put together his understanding of the psychological types from observing people who had various kinds of mental and psychological illness. So, yes, as I said before, Carl Jung was the originator of the idea of psychological types. He was not the master of it. In the same way, Homo habilis was the first of the hominids, we believe, to start using tools. They certainly are no match for Homo sapiens sapiens and our rocket ships and our nanotechnology and all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, Carl Jung can get things wrong. Of course he can. Everyone can. Everyone who starts off a certain field or theory is going to get a whole load of stuff wrong. And their contribution is to first go poking in that area and start trying to figure things out. They're not the finished article. And people give so much reverence to Carl Jung. And yes, he deserves a lot of reverence. He came up with amazing ideas. But psychological types is a particular part which was very experimental, very much him covering terra nova, new ideas, and of course he's going to make mistakes, as everyone would. So when it comes to this mistake, what is the mistake that Carl Jung made in terms of introverted sensing? Well, it all goes back to what I was talking about before in the extroverted sensation video, about external, internal, as opposed to extroverted, introverted. Carl Jung set out extroverted as being someone who has an orientation towards the object, and introverted as someone who has an orientation towards the subject, the person itself. The idea being that if it's the object, it's outside of yourself. You are essentially adapting to the reality of that thing. Whereas if it's introverted, it's your personal approach to that. It's what you hold within yourself about that thing. So you see me describing it sounds quite vague, because it is vague. It's actually a jumbling together of different concepts, which Jung didn't really pick out and make distinct. Socionics did. Socionics actually realized that this is actually a whole bundle of different ideas and separated them out into external and internal, and still extroverted, introverted being something slightly different. So, yeah, let's talk about introverted sensation. What should it be, really? Well, I'll tell you first of all what it shouldn't be. It shouldn't be, as Jung describes, this almost psychotic, internalized sense of how things really are, which makes you incapable of actually adapting to the real world. No, that's not right. You don't encounter many people like that. When you encounter people who are largely agreed to be ISTJs and ISFJs, they don't come across that way either. It's just false. That's not how it is. That is someone with some kind of psychosis, not a normal person. Okay, so let's put that to one side. Now, other ideas of introverted sensation that are not accurate. This focus on tradition. This idea that someone who's introverted sensation oriented is all about what used to be, what was in the past, and they're suddenly scared by things changing. This, again, is not accurate. This whole idea of introverted sensation being in the past is also wrong. This idea that you have to tie cognitive functions to parts in the time stream is not really right. It's not. It isn't accurate. Again, this idea of introverted sensation not being right, what it is not. It is not memory. again tied to the idea of the past, tied to this idea of tradition and being a stick in the mud and not being able to adapt to new things. No. It's not about memory. We all have memories. I remember things absolutely fine, as long as they are largely factual and largely conceptual. I don't have a good memory for little details, right? But I do have a memory. And everyone has a memory, unless you have some sort of short-term memory loss problem, something like that. Everyone remembers different things. Introverted sensation types remember things as well as extroverted intuition types and extroverted thinking types. An ENTJ, which according to 4-type theorists, which I don't think is right, who believe that they therefore don't have introverted sensation if you're an ENTJ or an ENFJ, right? They still have memory. You can't work out an ENFJ or an ENTJ by testing their memory and find they don't have a good memory. That's not a thing. That is not accurate. That's not right. So, no. Instead, let's talk about introverted sensation in terms of what it is. Because the way I've seen introverted sensation described makes it out to be so boring. It's sort of maps of process in terms of how you are meant to do things, and if you don't change it, if you change it slightly, it's all terribly wrong and all terrible and awful. No. Introverted sensation, right? Let's look at the dichotomies making it up. This is how you get to an accurate understanding, right? I talked about an extroverted sensation video about what a perception is and what sensation is, right? So introverted sensation is sensation. It is a kind of sensation like extroverted sensation, which means it shares all the facets of sensation with extroverted sensation. So it is also external, not internal. Despite being introverted sensation, it's still external. Really focus on that idea in your mind. Introverted sensation is external. Why? Because all sensation is external, right? And also it's involved, right? That means introverted sensation is not somewhere off in the past. It's not some memory of how things used to be. No, it is external. So it has to be directly shareable in the same way extroverted sensation is directly shareable. So introverted sensation is looking at this. It's looking in front of you. It's looking at me. It's looking at my fat face again, right? But the difference between introverted sensation and extroverted sensation, it's not what it's looking at. It is how it is approaching what is being looked at. That is the key difference between introverted sensation and extroverted sensation. Two different attitudes towards the same thing, which is sensation. Right. So, how do we articulate those differences? Well, first of all, sensation, when it's introverted sensation, I like to call it senses, right? Senses as opposed to force, extroverted sensation, right? First of all, it's introverted. So what does introversion mean in this context? Okay? Introverted sensation versus extroverted sensation. I talk about extroverted sensation being very accumulative. Oh, I want this stuff. I want to take this stuff. I want to, have huge tracts of land. I want to, push people out of my way because I'm taking everything. I'm going for it. I'm the hungry, ambitious one. I'm going to be able to tread on people's toes. Introverted sensation has no interest in that. Extroverted sensation is about getting the big mansion, having the big money, all the rest. Introverted sensation is comfortable with a cozy cottage. Why is it comfortable with a cozy cottage? Because it's not accumulating. It's refining. All introversion has something to do with refining the quality rather than expanding the quantity. And so for introverted sensation, less is more. Less is really more for this sort of type. These types, introverted sensation types. So these are the types which are about refining and balancing and harmonizing the sensory experiences. That is the key difference. And the other part, dynamic as opposed to static. We talk about static, distinct objects. This idea, when you look at these remote controls, they're distinct, they're separate. That is extroverted sensation. They're just separate objects. Introverted sensation is looking at it in a whole different way. It's taking a holistic approach to sensation. Dynamic, why? Because every part is continuously flowing into every other part. There aren't distinct objects. There is simply a harmony. There is an atmosphere. And we are all objects within that atmosphere, contributing to that atmosphere. That is the point for introverted sensation. So it's not about a memory of the past. It is actually about being in the present moment, experiencing the calm, the flow, the organic pace of nature as it is. And rather than, with extrovert sensation, impacting on things, being just another object against other objects, no. Introvert sensation is about how can all these different objects be refined and balanced in the perfect harmonized way, so that this is a comfortable experience, this is a nice experience, this is a good quality, conveniently flowing experience. That's the idea. It's not necessarily about comfort, not necessarily about pleasure either. It can be pleasure if it's more of an emotional approach to it. But really, it's about flow and harmony of those processes, quality of those processes. That's the idea. And that is a whole new rich and nuanced way of approaching sensation. So basically you've got two different approaches here. You've got extrovert sensation, the sort of the more Donald Trump sort of figure, but then you've got the Winnie the Pooh understanding of sensation, creating these very pleasant, very harmonized aesthetic experiences, refining them down, getting rid of interruptions and things which are likely to become stressful and discordant and cacophonous, harmonizing it all, creating those fine balances. That is introverted sensation. And when you look at people introverted sensation oriented, these are the ones who are going to be very down to earth. These are the ones who aren't about going off and striving to accomplish more things in terms of taking more stuff. No, it's about being at peace, finding that peace in the moment. It's about being comfortable with what you have. It's about essentially just being present and maintaining your space, maintaining yourself, maintaining your health. It is about being aware, for instance, of when your body is out of kilter, when the environment around you is out of kilter, when things are ugly or unpleasant or impinging on that balance, and then doing what is needed to maintain and restore that balance. To, if you're feeling, you want to get out, get some fresh air, go up and get some fresh air. If you're feeling tired, get some sleep. If you're feeling hungry, eat a bagel. That is introverted sensation, being aware of how to maintain that balance in all its fineness, in all its either beauty or flow or harmony and that organic pace. And people who are introverted sensation oriented tend to gravitate towards that sort of natural flow of processes, whether that's the study of nature, whether that is, it can be in machinery as well, but it's about the quality and the finesse and the smooth curves of the machinery. It's about seeing something of aesthetic beauty or functionality coming together in that kind of balanced and harmonized way. So that is introverted sensation, not memory. Yes, these types do tend to have very detailed memories because these are types who are oriented towards how to refine and balance the details. But it's not memory itself. It is rather when they remember, it tends to be more detail-oriented rather than, say, ideas-oriented. So yeah, that's introverted sensation. That is senses. So, I'm now going to talk about extroverted intuition. So, this is one which I think is not as hard done by as some of the other cognitive functions. I still think there are some things which are wrong in what people have come to understand about extroverted intuition. There's this idea that it's to do predominantly with associations between things, and that what they see as someone jumping from one idea to the next is that the focus is on the associations between the things rather than the things themselves. So that's not a major problem. It is a misconception. I think it's a misconception because, or born of, the misconceptions around extroverted sensation. And people are thinking, oh, well, if extroverted sensation are the things, extroverted intuition must be the connections between the things. No. It's the wrong understanding, but it isn't leading people to have great trouble identifying when someone has extroverted intuition or understanding the type. It's not actually that bad. But nevertheless, to have a coherent, clear and accurate understanding, I will do a video for this one as well. So, yeah, when it comes to extroverted intuition, This is about what's first of all intuition. Now, what is intuition? It's still a perception, like sensation is a perception, but it's the opposite kind of perception. It couldn't be more different from sensation. It is not external and involved. It's neither of those things. It is instead internal, and it is detached. So what does that mean? Well, I talk about external being about this, well, physical, not necessarily physical, but external thing, which we can all draw from, we can all see in front of us. I've talked about my fat face a couple of times already. Internal information has got nothing to do with that. It is within the mind's eye. It is something which cannot be directly shared unless I reinterpret into something that is shareable, and then you interpret it in your own way from that shareable information. It's a bit like, as an analogy, when you're having a telephone conversation, right? The sound from your voice does not carry over very large distances. So the point of a telephone is to convert sound waves into electrical signals, which are then converted back into sound waves for you to hear. That's kind of the idea of internal information. It has to be reinterpreted into a directly shareable medium from which it can then be interpreted again by the person. So there's no direct sharing going on in internal information. It is something which will always lead to different understandings when it's talked about and approached. So that's one thing for internal information. That's one of the key things. It is, as you could say, subjective rather than objective, which would be external information. The other thing is that it is detached as opposed to involved. Ideas, although they may occur to you, they don't actually go bang on your head. You can't feel extroverted intuition, or you can't feel intuition at all. It's just not vivacious. It is something which you experience as detached from yourself. You think about it rather than feel it. That is the key thing here. Intuition is ethereal. It doesn't have a physical shape. It doesn't have some sort of mass from which it can basically impact you. It can't do that. It is simply ideas. It is simply potential rather than the actual thing itself. You can't be hurt by an idea. You can be hurt by the actions caused by someone having an idea, of course, but you can't be hurt by the idea itself. So that is intuition, right? It is abstracted perceptions. It is not what is here right now. It's everything that is not here right now. Everything you see in this room right now is everything that's not in the room around me. It's not the walls. It's not my face. It's not that image on my wall. None of that. It is what's in your head. It's the different perceptions that you are imagining as I'm talking about intuition. All the different sort of ideas that come to mind, the interpretations, the symbols and meanings that are coming out of it. It's still perception. It's not an ought. There's nothing about an idea which is ought to be. It's simply a potential thing. It is an abstracted thing. The number one, right, is not a real thing. It's an abstracted concept. But that abstracted concept carries no ought or should. What should a one? It's a meaningless question. What is one? Well, one is essentially where there is only one. That's not a very good definition. It is essentially the abstraction from this. It is the abstraction from this. It is extraction from all of the things which are not multiples. That is one. So that is an example of intuition. So now we've got intuition out of the way. Let's go to extroverted intuition. Now, extroverted intuition applies the same dichotomies to intuition as extroverted sensation applies to sensation. So it is extroverted again. It is accumulative, like extroverted sensation. It is going to be about acquiring more and more and more and more of these ideas, of these potential things, these things which are not here concretely right now, right? Lots of them. Lots of what is potential. That is the extroverted side. There's also the static side. So again, like physical objects being separate and distinct from one another, this is an approach to intuition whereby each of these potentials, rather than actuals, are separate and distinct from one another. So this is about not so much outcomes or a strategy or a vision. No, it's about scenarios. It's about distinct possibilities. It's about the many different ways in which something could be. And could is a very important thing here. Sensation covered the is, whereas intuition, and specifically extroverted intuition, is dealing with the could. Not the will, but what is possible. That is the point for extroverted intuition. It is about keeping things open-ended. It is about maximizing the potential, allowing as many possible things to happen. It is about setting things up so that new potential things could happen. It's not necessarily novelty for it. People often associate extroverted intuition as being the pursuit of novelty. It's not necessarily novelty. It is instead the finding of something other than what is directly in front of us. And that is an important thing here. Extroverted intuition is the opposite of extroverted sensation. Despite being extrovert and static, it exists in opposition to extroverted sensation. Extroverted sensation exists in opposition to extroverted intuition. People may be saying, no, that makes no sense. Introverted sensation must be the opposite of extroverted intuition. No, because you can have someone doing introverted sensation and actually supporting and helping extroverted intuition. If anything, they are meant to help each other. They actually are two sides of the same coin. What is that coin? That coin is the appreciation of the universe, both in terms of discovering all the possibilities that are there in the universe, what it could possibly be, what its potential is, but also then refining those experiences, making the most of what you've experienced, actually savouring what you've experienced. That's the introverted sensation part. They go together. But no, extroverted sensation and extroverted intuition are at loggerheads. And it is very, very clear why that is. Because when you're extroverted sensation, you are taking things on head on, right? That's the thing I want. I'm going to get it. I'm going to go straight at it. I'm going to pit my will against it and I'm going to conquer it. Extroverted intuition is the opposite of that. It is not thinking about the thing. It is thinking about all the different directions and angles around the thing. It's about thinking about alternative things rather than the thing. That is the point of extroverted intuition. It is alternatives to the actual. And it's about maximizing one's comprehension of the alternatives to the actual. It is about thinking outside of the box. Why? Because there's so many other boxes out there to look at and explore. It is about the what else. Extroverted intuition is about the what if, the what else, the what if. That idea of going outside of any defined parameter to find alternatives. And so when we look at people who are very focused on extroverted intuition, these are the people who take their ideas, their thinking, to all sorts of different possibilities and directions. They come up with new stuff, not because it's all about new for the sake of new. It's because they are continuously seeking alternatives. They are continuously turning over stones that have yet to be turned over, because that carries new potential to add to our understanding of how things could be. So yeah, that is extroverted intuition. It happens to be my leading function. I might even say the reason I'm into socionics is because of extroverted intuition, because I see it as the vessel of the greatest number of new possibilities that, if I just push enough, could erupt into all sorts of new outcomes, all sorts of new directions in which human civilization can go. Elon Musk is another example with his mission to Mars, because that will unlock all sorts of things for the future. It's not about focusing on a set destination. It is about contributing to the amount of potential and almost impregnating the future with the potential for new ideas and new perspectives and all those sorts of alternatives which could erupt. But again, it's not novelty for the sake of novelty. It's alternatives for the sake of alternatives.
Me again. The Type Mastery Pathway awaits. We're currently offering the course at a 50% discount, so consider signing up before the time runs out. To find out more, click the link in the description below.
When we talk about introverted intuition, what is often the question is what it isn't, rather than necessarily what it is. Because so much seems to be attributed to this mystical, magical cognitive function, which I prefer to call information element. It has all sorts of different famous figures typed as INTJs and INFJs, from Friedrich Nietzsche all the way to Arnold Schwarzenegger. There is a tendency to ascribe very special qualities to these two types, Myers-Briggs, the INTJ, the INFJ, sociologics, the IAI, the ILI. But what I would say is that perhaps the reason why there's this sort of confusion around introverted intuition, I think it kind of stems from Jung himself, because I think when he came to describing this, it was pretty vague, just flashes of the unconscious and something deeply symbolic and deeply interpretive, to the point where it's quite difficult to establish where introverted intuition begins and where it ends. Now, the good thing about socionics is that we use dichotomies for everything, not just the types, for the information elements, cognitive functions themselves. So that allows us to really build a clear picture of what this very ethereal and insubstantial in its nature cognitive function really is. So yeah, let me do that now. So I've already talked about perceptions, and within descriptive information, and within descriptive information, intuition, which is that perception which is internal and also detached. So we looked at that for extroverted intuition, this idea that intuition is in the mind's eye. It's not out there in the world. It's not something you can just see in front of you. And even for extroverted intuition, which is extroverted, it's still actually in the mind's eye. It's still internal. But yeah, so internal, but also detached. You can't feel intuition. Your introverted intuition is not going to be a feeling you have. It's going to be something you think about. It's going to be something detached from you and not experienced vivaciously. It's not something which can cause pain. It is not felt. It is simply thought about. So that's intuition. But now we come to introverted intuition, which first of all is introverted. So a bit like how introverted sensation is refining sensory objects, you could say, refining sensory experience. Introverted intuition is refining and narrowing down, filtering out, you could say, intuition, filtering the possibilities. It is narrowing down those possibilities towards those which are most important, those which are most meaningful, purposeful, you could say. And that's kind of the idea of introverted intuition. It's not open-minded. This is a misconception. People think that introverted intuitive types are going to get on so well with extroverted intuition types that somehow their intuitions are going to balance. They're not going to balance. They're going to confuse one another. They're going to be at cross purposes. Why is that? Well, because while the extroverted intuitive type is going to be wanting to be opening up possibilities, showing new ideas, new possibilities to explore, and wanting to explore them with someone else, introverted intuition is going to be saying, no, that's not important to me. That's not relevant to me in my life. Why should I give this any of my attention whatsoever? And that's the point, really. Introverted intuition is all about making a virtue out of closed-mindedness, not open-mindedness. Introverted intuition is about penetrating depth of insight, but it's not to do with breadth. It's not to do with curiosity. They can be curious about those things which are already shown to be on the path they want to follow, those things which are already of import, of relevance, of significance to them. But they don't go outside of that. They don't want to. It's not. That's just. It's just seen as a waste of their time. No, these are types which are very much about finding the narrow route. But that narrowness is meant to be something which leads towards something greater, something more profound than what the day-to-day can offer us. And that also leads me to dynamic as opposed to static. So the idea for introverted intuition is that it's not lots of different distinct scenarios to explore. There's this one to explore, that one, that one, that one. It's not the sort of pick and mix of possibilities which extroverted intuition is about. Instead, it's having refined the possibility to that outcome which is most important. It is about seeing the flow and development of the past through the present all the way through to the future. And why the past? Well, in Myers, often sort of Jungian cognitive function people, some of the Myers-Briggs people suggest that introverted sensations about the past. No, the past is not connected to our direct sensory perception. It's back there. And unless you've experienced it directly, you have no sensory recollection. So often when we're thinking about the past, we're thinking about how things might have happened. No sensation is going to tell you about the Roman Empire. No, it's introverted intuition, which in the same way as it is trying to divine what is going on later, is also trying to divine what happened before and how that led to the modern day. It is about interpreting trends and developments over time. There's no bias towards behind us or ahead of us. So that's an important thing to keep in mind. A lot of introverted intuitive types can be historians. David Stark is a very clear example of an introverted intuitive historian. And there are almost certainly others. If you look at, for instance, Josephus as an example, as a Roman historian who I say is also introverted intuition leading. There are plenty of other examples. And philosophers who are introverted intuition tend to talk about the development of trends over time. Karl Marx talking about the progression of history towards his version of his Marxism, his version of socialism. Nietzsche talking about the giving away of man to the Übermensch, this sort of giving way to the future version of ourselves and where we came from and where we're leading out. Oswald Spengler, very, very clear example of introverted intuition. This idea that civilization is destined to break down, to fall apart, and it's all part of the lifespan of civilizations over many hundreds of years. So yes, all very much introverted intuition, very dynamic because it's about that flow, that time stream, rather than distinct separateness. Instead, everything is linking into everything else and moving forwards. So other things I should say about introverted intuition. It is the opposite of introverted sensation. It's not the opposite of extroverted sensation. They complement. Because if you're very much about introverted intuition, you're kind of looking for someone who's actually going to act on the strategy or the plan you've set out, the vision that you have. You need someone who actually has the gumption to go out and do it. And that is why figures like Arnold Schwarzenegger or Vladimir Lenin being INTJ, it's ridiculous. They're not. Men of action cannot be INTJs or INFJs. That's not what they are good at doing. Their strengths lie in strategy. They don't lie in tactics. They're not good at acting. They're not good at actually moving from thinking about to doing it. They kind of need an urgency to break them out of their mental spiral to actually do something. They crave the urgency from other people who are more action-oriented. They aren't tough. They can be disagreeable, they can be contrarian, but they're not tough. They're not able to actually make you do what they want to do. They're not good at it. They don't know how to act in the immediate moment to get what they need. That's where extroverted sensation is useful. So it's not that that's the opposite. Their strengths don't lie there. What is the opposite? That's introverted sensation. That is what cannot be in the same spot as introverted intuition. And why is that? Well, the more you are in introverted sensation, the more you are involving yourself, immersing yourself in the day-to-day flow of experiences, And the more you're doing that, the less you are detaching from the day-to-day towards the trends and directions and outcomes of greater significance. The whole point of introverted intuition is it acts against introverted sensation. It belittles introverted sensation. It calls it trivial, calls it unimportant, irrelevant, insignificant, right? Introverted intuition has a disdain towards the mundane. Extroverted intuition doesn't have that problem. It actually wants people to help save the possibilities they found. Extroverted intuition gets troubled with people who are narrow, who are rigid in their thinking, but they're not so worried by they hate people who are not open-minded to new perspectives and want to listen and learn all the rest. But they don't mind people who are sort of in the day-to-day, just enjoying things, as long as they're interested in listening to new stories and ideas. It's introverted intuition says these regular, humdrum, everyday folk, they aren't, they're not my cup of tea. I'm looking for people who are really connected up into the cosmic events, the really important things and which things turn. That's more introverted intuition. They don't like triviality, mundanity. So yeah. Other things I should say, none of introverted intuition is about judgment or oughts or shoulds. It's still perception. So it's not about what should happen. It's about what will happen. It's just how things will be. It will be this. That is how events are leading through. This sort of fatalism or determinism of introverted intuition is a key thing here. The idea that you are fated to do this. Or, in the case of some types, it's more about if you go down this route, it will lead to disaster. I can see the disaster ahead of me. The sort of the prophet of doom. In the same way as the prophet of destiny. Yeah, anything else I could say? No, I think that's pretty much it about introverted intuition. Yeah, a lot of people are these types which aren't introverted types. It's not really magical. It's just the ability to pick out those trends of greater significance and kind of inferentially build a picture in terms of where are things going fundamentally and what is important, which ideas and possibilities have weight and which ones don't have weight and are not worth focusing your mind or attention on. So yeah, that's what it's all about. I'm talking about extroverted thinking, or what we like to call extroverted logic. So, first I'm going to say what that is not. So that's not anything to do with procedures, with rules, structures, making people do things, bossing people about. It's got nothing to do with that. And the misconception of this has led to, I think, a lot of people being mistyped as ENTJ that are not ENTJ. So you think of a sort of that figure like a Napoleonic figure, this sort of big boss character. No, that's not an ENTJ. That's more often than not an ESTP. It's ESTP that has that more forceful, more primal dominance backed up by structure, which we'll go into in the introverted thinking video, that essentially ends up laying down their decree and making things the way they want it to be and organising everyone in that kind of way. That's not extroverted thinking at all. Neither is extroverted thinking that sort of OP, objective personality thing, which is about building your sense of how to think by going out and talking to all sorts of other people to find out what they think and deriving your view from the consensus, the tribe thought, you could say. No, extroverted thinking actually is quite a bit to do with thinking for yourself. So it's almost the opposite of that. There are cases where, say, someone has valued extroverted thinking, say we call it suggestive function or like an inferior function, and they're not strong at extroverted thinking, so they seek it from other people. That could look like that. They often can end up typing as extroverted thinking types in OP, but that's not extroverted thinking itself. So let me say what it is. So it's a judgment, so it's prescriptive, oughts, correct, incorrect, how things ought to be, what is better, what is worse, etc. It is going to be thinking, right? And thinking is external. So That means, by being external, right, that it is information which is directly shareable. And we know that thinking is directly shareable because we transfer knowledge, right? We transfer what we know, what the facts we know about the world directly, right? I can tell it to you. You can learn that. You can apply that. You can apply the structured and worked out according to methodologies knowledge and wisdom in your life for how you do things in your life. That's directly shareable. It doesn't have to be reinterpreted. It is the thought itself carries across, and we derive our thoughts from observing how things work, right? So you know that if you were to apply a rule or a structure, you'd know, and everyone would be able to agree if something is not in the rules, something does not work better. Oh, the situation is we've now produced fewer apples than we did yesterday, so we know this method we're using is worse. So it's external. We can all share in that data. This is why you have the scientific literature, and this is why we can all read those articles to get a sense of the world around us, right? So that's one thing. Thinking is external. It's also detached. It's something which you don't feel, you think about. Hence why the Myers-Briggs people, they call it thinking. You think about it. Logic is detached. So all information that is external and detached, so basically information which is, you don't feel it, you can't perceive it like this, you can't see it, you can't feel it, you can't touch it, but nevertheless it is directly shareable. That is data. That is methodologies. That is wisdom. That is knowledge. That is how we both make sense and come to know our world. That is the realm of thinking. And right, and these sort of facts, again, these are not. Some people think that extroverted sensation is about facts, but it's about perceptions. It's perceptive. The perceptive fact is this is blue and I can see it's blue and I'm experiencing that. But collecting and crunching data quantitatively, that's not really a perceptual thing anymore. Instead, it's about knowledge, and it carries an ought to it in terms of, is it correct data, is it accurate data, or is it inaccurate data? It can be right, it can be wrong. Facts and propositions about our world are either right or they're wrong. They are correct or incorrect. And some propositions are this is better than that. That is a more accurate representation. That is producing a better outcome. These are all thinking-based judgments. Always objective, very objective, which is objectivity in that sort of both sorts of sense. Impersonal objectivity is very much that thinking extrovertedness. Externality and detachedness. So that is what thinking is. Now within thinking, we're talking about extroverted thinking now. So again, the dichotomies apply in a different combination now. So the idea here is that if something is extroverted thinking is extroverted. It's also dynamic rather than static, different for the perceptions. If they're extroverted, they're static. Now it's dynamic. So what does dynamic extroverted thinking look like? What is that about? Well, first of all, the idea here is it's no longer about distinct separate things. Instead, it's holistic. It is a coming together of lots of things. But it's not about refining anymore. It's not about it, because it's extrovert, it's no longer refining this holistic, ever-changing thing. It is about increasing it, accumulating it, maximizing it. So it's not like I want this, I want that, I want this, I want that, which is very static in its extroversion. Now it's about how much more can we make this? How much better can we make this? How can we improve this? How can we advance this further? How can we make this thing optimum and keep it optimum in an environment where facts are continuously changing? And that is the point for extroverted thinking. It is a very fluid approach to thinking. I call it pragmatism. The reason I call it pragmatism is very much there's no absolute truth. It depends on the situation. And you need to utilize your thinking to figure out what are the facts of the situation and how can you, using those facts and other knowledge you've acquired, come up with a methodology that works best. And the idea is that things will continue to improve. Look at technology. Look how we've gone from the hand axe to the spear to the bow and arrow, the crossbow, the musket, the machine gun, the atomic bomb. The advancement of technology is based on the idea that circumstances are changing and we're constantly having to improve how we kill people in the case of weaponry. But there are many other examples, right? The computer, the camera recording me right now, all based on looking at how things work, finding out how things can be improved based on more data that we've acquired. That is what extroverted logic is all about. Having, first of all, right, a methodology for how to effectively and accurately gather information. Accuracy of data is very important for extroverted thinking. And accuracy, it's not structural. It is, are these actually the facts? Have these facts been gathered in the right way? Have we made certain that this is a reliable process for gathering data? And then, are these facts therefore true, or are we simplifying? Are we generalizing? Because extroverted thinking does not like to simplify and generalize. When someone who's extroverted thinking in the leading function explains something to you, it's probably going to be quite long, and they're probably not going to like you paraphrasing what they're saying, because they're trying to give you all the facts that are relevant, and they are trying to, in giving you all the facts that are relevant, tell you the truth as it is, accurately, so that you can derive that and you can reproduce and use that as well effectively. They don't want to miss out on information which will actually be useful. And this is the point, it's the use, how well things are working and the use of ensuring that it is working well. This is extroverted thinking, and therefore from that, making the continuous improvements. So extroverted types, they don't really, there's never a rest to this. It's an ongoing thing of improving how things are working. So yes, that is what extroverted thinking is about. We see this in lots of different figures, people who work in technology, in business. There's often this idea of being able to think for yourself. Why think for yourself? Because you need to be competent. You need to be capable. Extroverted thinking types are all about acquiring and applying knowledge well. So competence is a very key thing. Instead of a hierarchy of power, it's about finding a hierarchy of competence, because it's the idea that you can improve and get better from facts and do things more effectively, provide actual value in terms of how you work, and that value is not emotional value, it is facts value. I have produced, I've optimized this process. I can pick 90 apples in 1 minute rather than 3 apples in 1 minute. That is factually an improvement. That is what extroverted logic is all about.
You might not be ready to purchase the Type Mastery Pathway all at once. That's fine. If you want to get a taster, you can now purchase specific modules one at a time. How about Module 1, which dives deep into all 7 dichotomies that define each element, with information you won't find elsewhere online? More info can be found by clicking the link in the description below.
Now I'm going to talk about introverted thinking. So, again, this is a judgment, not a perception. It carries an ought or a should. It is thinking, so it's external, and it is detached. And yes, people may be thinking, introverted thinking is external. Well, it is. It very much is, because it's directly shareable. It's something which you can transmit to others. Why is it that when it comes to principles, these principles can be communicated? If introverted thinking or introverted logic were not external, we wouldn't have religions or philosophies or laws of the land. We wouldn't be able to transmit structures to one another, but we can. We can because it's external. It is directly transferable. It doesn't have to be reinterpreted for us to grasp it. It's not just in the mind's eye. We think about it, but it isn't interpreted. It is very much a obvious kind of information, and it's impersonal in its nature. So, yeah, introverted thinking is external, and it's detached. We're thinking about it, and that's rather less controversial. Now, the reason I think people get the impression that extroverted thinking is external, but introverted thinking is not external, I think it comes again from Jung. I don't think that Jung was inaccurate in how he described extroverted thinking and introverted thinking. I don't think he mucked it up like introverted sensation. I think he actually was quite on point. But how he ascribed it to extroversion and introversion, I think that is more of the issue. Now, what I think is definitely right, extroverted thinking is the empirical, go out and don't talk to other people and find out what they think and base your opinion on that. No. Go out and observe how things are really working, gather the data, and continuously improve and revise how you are, what information, what knowledge base you have to keep up to date. That's very much extroverted thinking. And it is a looking outwards, you could say. The key thing here is that it is something which is accumulating continuously. That is the point. And the thing which is accumulated continuously is empirical data. Now, when it comes to introverted thinking, right, it is first of all introverted. So it is about refining again, not accumulating. And not only is it about refining, it is static. It is not dynamic. So it's not about change. If it does change, right, it breaks entirely and has to be completely reformed. That's completely different to extroverted thinking. Extroverted thinking was about, think of that as being almost like an avalanche of snow, and as it pours down the mountain, it's multiple moving parts coming together. It's an overall thing, but it's like a storm of ice rolling down this mountain, but all the different parts are moving around. It's accumulating more bits of terrain as it goes down. It's a bit messy, you could say, but it's very true in its messiness. It has all the the bits of grit that exist. It doesn't deny any of the bits of grit that exist, but it is a mess. Extroverted thinking is about the mess of reality and how to understand that, how to apply that. Introverted thinking is not like this. Introverted thinking is where the data is cleaned up. It is turned into a structure, a framework, a model of that supposedly messy, very sort of factual, empirical reality. So introverted thinking is structural. So refining things down to its underlying principles. And those principles aren't meant to be broken, because the principles have to cohere with one another. And as soon as you change a principle, there's no guarantee that will cohere the rest of the principles in your theory, in your model, if you're in your framework. It will likely break the framework. So you're going to have to rebuild everything. So whereas extroverted thinking is this sort of avalanche, where it doesn't really matter what facts go in as long as they are real facts, introverted thinking is that delicate glass sculpture. It's been formed. It is something which is very much about its integrity of its structure. If you were to tap it and break off a little bit, the whole thing would shatter, fall apart, and you have to build it all up again. That is the introverted thinking approach. Introverted judgments are kind of brittle in that way. They hold to their set form, and they cannot be changed without being changed entirely, in other words, being shattered. So yes, introverted thinking is very different to extroverted thinking. It's no longer the empirical kind of thinking. It's no longer what we call a posteriori, or knowledge obtained after observation. No, now it's knowledge obtained before observation. Not necessarily before, but without, it can be done without observation. And the reason why it can be done without observation is that it's not really derived from how things are working. It is derived from what are the relationships, the logical relationships between the propositions. This is why it comes to this idea of it's more introverted in terms of it's within. It's not within me, it's not in my mind's eye. We can see the relations between propositions just by doing mathematics, right? 2 plus 2 will always equal 4. It makes no sense for 2 plus 2 to equal 5 unless you're in 1984. Unless you're in a George Orwell novel. But no, it's just as external. It's just directly shareable, but it's based on the relationships between things, and those relationships can be fractured if your model is not absolute and impossible to not be other than what it is. So when it comes to introverted thinking, theories, structures, philosophies, theologies, even there's another thing. People don't think that introverted thinking has any place in religion. Religion's a feeling thing. No, religious ideology, where it's structure based, and these are principles, and this is the law or structure you're meant to follow, because that is what the truth is, the real truth underneath all the sort of messy facts. That is introverted thinking, and you'll find that those people who are very principle driven, who stick to the principles of a theory, and they don't change their view based on the situation. They will uphold their principles regardless of what the situation demands. That is introverted thinking. Because again, it's not about changing with each situation. It's not it depends on the situation. This is the truth. This is the true understanding of how things fit together. That's very much introverted thinking. Yes, and you also find it in the more sort of command control people, where introvert thinking with extrovert sensation, you can get more sort of like structure and hierarchy and all the rest. But in terms of metaphysical truth of introverted thinking, look at DNA. The code of DNA is introverted thinking. It is a structure. It has certain rules, and based on those rules, that defines what our phenotype, ordains what our phenotype's going to be. Whether I have a ginger beard despite having brown hair or not, that is very much a result of DNA. Or the laws of gravity, right? Yes, you can come to understand the laws of gravity by applying extroverted thinking, right? Good scientific processes. But as soon as you describe it as a law, in all cases, this is what happens. This is introverted thinking. And the theoretical cosmologists, not the sort of more empirical scientists who do all the testing, but the ones who come up with the theories for and models for what the universe is meant to work like, they are more introverted thinking people rather than extroverted thinking people. You'll see these differences between, say, the engineers and the experimental physicists versus the mathematicians and the theoretical physicists. That's a very clear divide between extroverted thinking and introverted thinking. And there's this idea in philosophy that a posteriori knowledge which is collected from observation, that is synthetic. That's going to tell you about how the world really works. And a priori knowledge is more analytic, in that the truth is derived from the relationships between things making it up. Perfect example, right? The human body is made up of... I've got a better one. Apparently, is an interesting one. An interesting extroverted logic fact. Yes, apparently around a third of people produce methane in their farts. So when they light their farts, it has a blue flame, and the rest of the people, it's going to be yellow because there's just sulfur. No, another gas. There's no methane. That's a little synthetic fact. It's something that tells you about the world. Whereas a introverted logic and analytic a priori example would be all bachelors are unmarried men, because that is exactly what a bachelor is. There's no bachelor in the world that is not an unmarried man. So that would be introverted thinking. The connections between propositions rather than the propositions themselves. That would be introverted thinking. So, yeah, that's what it's about, really. Pragmatism for extroverted thinking versus laws, structure, principles, philosophies, frameworks, and models for introverted thinking. And if you're dealing with something like typology, you're already perhaps more likely to be introverted thinking oriented. Not always. There are extroverted thinking people involved in typology who use typology very loosely in order to come up with useful self-development tips and ways to improve yourself, which is more an extroverted thinking way of sort of hijacking introverted thinking. But it's, yeah, that's the idea. Those are the differences between them. Anyway, that's introverted thinking for you. I'm now going to cover extroverted feeling, or what we often tend to call extroverted ethics in socionics. So, yeah, I covered thinking. Now we're covering feeling, extroverted feeling. So, first I'll say what it's not. Extroverted feeling is not about harmony. I already talked about introverted sensation as being a lot more to do with harmony. And harmony can be harmony with people. It can be harmony with things. It's not necessarily nice, cuddly, fluffy. Nice, cuddly, fluffy is more of a combination of both introverted sensing and extroverted feeling together. So SFJs, really. But the problem with is sort of, the SFJs and Myers-Briggs, right? That understanding is then taken to understand extroverted feeling when it's with introverted intuition, the NFJs in Myers-Briggs. And so they're overly understood in SFJ terms. So what ends up happening is that essentially ENFJs are misunderstood, very much misunderstood. They are not necessarily nice, cuddly, fluffy like ESFJs. Even ESFJs, just because of nice, cuddly, fluffy, they're necessarily nice people. They beat some terrible people who are ESFJs, they're like of almost every type. But for instance, people find it very strange when I say that Adolf Hitler, for instance, was an ENFJ, not an ENTJ. Because the point is, he wasn't a thinker. He was not cuddly. He was not fluffy. He was not very nice. He was not about harmony. But he was using extroverted feeling, not extroverted thinking. Remember when I described extroverted thinking, this sort of very sort of empirical, very much how things work, improve how things function sort of person. That's not it. That's not Hitler. He was an artist. He was a visionary. He was a dramatic soul who did some awful, awful things. But that is, yeah, none of that's to do with extroverted thinking. So, yeah, extroverted feeling is not necessarily about harmonizing your relationships with others. It's not even about relationships. No. It is something which is feeling. And first of all, I'll talk about what feeling is before I launch into what extroverted feeling is. So, feeling is a kind of judgment. Again, it is oughts based, it is prescriptive. It is now internal rather than external. So it is about how what is within. It is a subjective judgment. It is a sentimental kind of judgment, right? And just because you have certain sentiments, it doesn't mean someone else will also have those sentiments that you have. Now, maybe you meet someone who is, and that person who feels the same way on things as you do, you may have a very special bond and connection. But there's no guarantee you can make someone feel differently. There's no guarantee that you can change someone's subjective judgments. Sometimes you can, but it's not. There's no science to it. It is an interpretive, intuitive art to be able to move someone's emotions. So, yeah, it is internal. And the point is, if you were to remove human beings from the planet, right, you would still have thinking. You'd still have processes. You'd still have structures. You'd still have all the things that work, unless you're Berkeley, in which case everything disappears, because, well, unless, of course, God's looking at everything, as Berkeley would have said. But no, Whereas if you remove people, if you remove life from the world, all feeling would go. There would be no feeling, there'd be no emotion anymore, because you actually need someone to feel. You don't need someone for thinking to be as it is, because that's just the facts. So, no. So, yes, feeling is internal. Feeling is also involved now, not detached. And it's in the name again. Feeling, ethics as we call it. It is something you feel. It is sentimental, so you are feeling it. You feel it in your heart, what I say, the amygdala, right? Rather than feel in your touch receptors in your skin as sensing would be. But it's still feeling. It is the emotional kind of feeling. So yes, that's what feeling or ethics is. And again, like with thinking, feeling can either be information that is extroverted and dynamic, or introverted and static. In this case, extroverted feeling is extroverted and it's dynamic. So again, it's this idea of a sort of continuously changing and developing thing, like with extroverted thinking, continuously developing and changing, and accumulating, increasing in its intensity, in its muchness. But there's no longer a distinctness between things, like with statics, like with extroverted sensation or extroverted intuition. It is a holistic, general, ever-changing thing. And so, but rather than it being holistic, general, ever-changing, facts, methodologies, processes, continuously updating and improving that, now it's about moods. It's about emotions. It is about the emotive energy you convey, your style, your vibe, your charisma, your way of coming across, how you land words for other people to like what you're saying, respond well to what you're saying, or be provoked to respond with anger, because that's also in terms of extroverted feeling. And this is why extroverted feeling cannot be harmony. It can be used to create harmony, that's part of it, but it could also be used to create disharmony, because extroverted feeling is about all the emotions, all the moods, and how to shape and change that in oneself, in also the environment around you. So extroverted feeling is the mood management information element. It is about, right, how people are likely to react to you, how you're going to come across to people, by knowing, right, what causes people to respond. How do I make this statement in a way that's going to cause people to react in the way I want them to react? And yes, I talked about Adolf Hitler, terrible human being, but very much extroverted feeling, because he was able to galvanize the Germans around his vision. He had immense charisma. You see in his speeches this sort of very gesticulating, passionate person who was able to get people to also be on board with that passion. That's very strong extroverted feeling at play. And you can see in other figures like Bill Clinton, very charismatic, or Ronald Reagan, Tony Blair, but also in figures like Martin Luther King, very able to find the right way to appeal to and stir the emotions. JFK, another one. But also artists, because it doesn't have to be in the world of politics. It can also be in a creative space. People who come up with music and art forms, again, move, which convey a certain image or a way of being, which can stir people up or cheer people up. Whether that is music which makes you feel good, like a sort of Paul McCartney, or it can be music which inspires and makes you think more deeply on things, like a David Bowie. All would fall under extroverted feeling. This sort of ability to shape and change mood using all sorts of media, and how you manage yourself to come across to others in the way you want to come across to others. That can upset, but it can also console. Think about someone like Kanye West, very much an extroverted feeling figure, but not necessarily one that people are particularly happy with at the moment. But whatever he does on purpose. He knows exactly how to provoke, to get people to be talking about him, to be responding to him in terms of what he's saying. Very, very big skill he has there. So yes, that is what extroverted feeling is about. This sort of extroverted, dynamic thing. It's not necessarily harmonized. It's not necessarily nice. It can be very nice. They can be the nicest people, but also if their mood changes, they can be some of the most horrible people. Because that's the thing. Mood. It's dynamic. It changes. Mood changes. So how you treat others, it can be based on your mood. Are you happy? Are you in a good mood? Or are you in a bad mood? Is this amazing or is this terrible? And this is the judgment aspect of it. It is conveying a sense of this is something to feel joy about, or this is something to despair in. This is something to be furious about and be motivated to act upon it. All very much in terms of extroverted feeling. That ought is being carried throughout. But that then means that people are extroverted feeling oriented, that they approach things in terms of their passions and their moods. That is not set, it is not stable, it's not fixed. So an extroverted feeling person may often say things they don't mean because they feel it in that moment. And this is where extroverted feeling is the opposite of extroverted thinking. Again, they are opposition. They cannot exist in the same space. Because on the one hand, you've got extroverted thinking, which is very matter of fact, right? This is how it is, that is how it is, these are the facts, this is the information, can be quite dry but very informative. And extroverted feeling is the opposite of that. It's not about informing you. It's about conveying authentically how you are feeling to other people, to transmit your emotions across so people know how you're feeling. And that means exaggeration. I feel terrible. This is awful. This is the worst thing that's ever happened. The people who get dramatic, the people who exaggerate, they go against extroverted thinking, which is anti-exaggeration, very much about matter of fact. But in doing so, in exaggerating and making things more exciting, more engaging, you're listening with rapt attention. This is an entertaining figure. This is sung with style and charisma. By doing that, you're sacrificing extroverted thinking. You're losing the matter-of-factness. You're losing the factual accuracy in what's being delivered. So that's why extroverted feeling and extroverted thinking are exact opposites. They can't exist in the same space. So yeah, that is extroverted feeling. I should also say extroverted feeling complements introverted thinking. Both of them are creating the sense of clarity, a clarity that rallies people together around the judgments. For introverted thinking, it's about setting out those structures, those frameworks, easy, simple, sometimes not necessarily, can be quite complex, but the idea is refined down. It's not endless facts. There's a structure. And structures are communicated well over distances. You can get millions of people to believe in the same ideology. It's quite difficult to get millions of people to all acknowledge the same expanse of factual information. That's why you get experts in different fields for extroverted thinking. Whereas you don't, for introverted thinking, you've got the structure. It's communicated across. Everyone's got the same structure. Extroverted feeling supports that, because introverted thinking, it's not very engaging on its own. But when someone's using introverted thinking, like conveying it with passion and excitement, that is where introverted thinking is able to carry across. And extroverted feeling is also very much about clarity, because it is conveying how I feel. It's not, I feel a bit of this and I feel a bit of that. It's all very complicated. No, it's, I feel amazing. I feel terrible. It's that sort of digitization of information towards absolutes. Both extroverted feeling and introverted thinking deal with things in that digital, absolute way. And extroverted thinking, no, it's more analog. It's all the sort of it depends in the situation complexity. So yeah, that is extroverted feeling.
If you feel much more knowledgeable from watching this video, just think about what you could do if you knew how to apply what you had learned. In the Type Mastery Pathway, you'll learn how to accurately type other people, and if you're ready to take the final exam, you can earn a certificate accrediting you as a WSS Socionist. Again, for more information, click the link in the description below.
Alright, I'm now going to talk about introverted feeling, the last one of the 8. So, Not by no means the least, I should say. Well, it is the least, for me at least. It is my blind spot. It is what's often called in sociology the vulnerable function. I would call it the blind spot function. But it's some people in BB call it the trickster function, but I don't think it really works. But yeah, introverted feeling. Least for me, not least for anyone else, but just for ILEs and SLEs. But yeah, what is this about? So, first of all, what is it not? It is this idea that introverted feeling, because it's about personal values, right? That any sort of moral code must be about introverted feeling. We've seen examples like Bernie Sanders in America must be introverted feeling because he's so moral and he always cares about what's right and what's wrong. Introverted feeling can be very much related to morality, but not in this sort of ideological, structure-based way, right? Introverted feeling types, it's not about calling themselves an ist. I am a socialist, I am a capitalist, I am a whatever it is. The istness is far more of an introverted thinking thing because the idea it's about a structure, it is about a system of beliefs that you hold. Introverted feeling is not about a system of beliefs that you hold. It's not systematic, it is anti-systematic. Instead, let's go into it. So, first of all, introverted feeling against feeling, it is sentimental. An ideology isn't sentimental. An ideology is structural. An ideology is based on principles and it's derived from those principles. And from that, you can work out based on the rules what is with the ideology or outside the ideology. Introverted feeling can't tell you that. Introverted feeling is, again, sentimental because it's feeling. It is something which is felt. It is involved and is internal, so it is interpretive. It is subjective. You can't directly transmit it like you can with thinking. No, it's not an ideology. Instead, right, it is about sentiments. And specifically, it is, because it's introverted feeling, it is refining it down to the few as a clear thing. It's not accumulating more and more and more. No, it's the few. It is refining those. It is also static. So again, it is not about it is not changing moods and emotions. It's not the energy or the aura or the charisma of someone. No, it's attitudes. It's something which is set personal judgments towards either things, can be things as well, or people. It's not a sense of I feel great, I feel amazing, this is wonderful. That's extroverted feeling. When I get to introverted feeling, it is I like this, I dislike this, I don't feel that is a good thing, I feel that is evil. That kind of idea, these personal subjective judgments which people can form. I'm not very good at forming them, it's my blind spot. But yes, it's about attitude formation, personal judgment, nothing to do with reason, all to do with consulting your heart, amygdala, and realizing what your attitudes towards things really are. And that is especially, that takes legs, that has legs when it starts to run forwards, when you start to apply it to people, right? Personal judgments towards people. Reading someone's, because another thing, right? It's another thing. Every single cognitive function, every information is about all the information in that domain. So it's not just your personal attitudes. It's also the attitudes and sentiments of other people, their intentions. Knowing your intentions, knowing what other people's intentions are, getting a sense of what their attitudes towards you are. Do they like you? Do they dislike you? Do they mean you well? Do they mean you harm? Are they someone who has a good soul or a bad soul? This is very much in the nature of introverted ethics, introverted feeling. And that's why it's got this tying up with morality. It has a moral feel, but it's not a structural morality. Morality is more complicated. It can exist in different ways. Introverted thinking types can be very moral. Look at the previous pope. Very clear example of very moral in a very introverted thinking way. But then there's the moral of I don't want to mistreat anyone. I want to I want to treat I know that's a good person. I'm going to stand by that person. That's very much in line with introverted feeling. The idea of forming personalized, subjective judgments. And the idea is that it allows them to build relationships with people. It's what we like to call it in sociologics, relations, the ethics of relations, because you are building these personal relationships with each person, and it's highly individualized to each person as well, because each person's different. Each person has a different character, a different soul, as it were, and you cannot mix and match one soul for another. It is one of a kind. So each relationship is different. So these aren't types which are about being in the group and the group mood. Extroverted ethics is about the group mood, how everyone is feeling, being able to change and shape that mood and that energy and atmosphere. Introverted feeling is very much not about expression of feeling, and more about simply acting sincerely in line with one's personal attitude that one forms towards each particular person or thing. And yes, it can be very tender, can be very sort of sincere, very sort of quite deep in one's connection and intimacy. And that's the thing, it's once you encounter someone, you get a sense of what their character is, you can build that closeness of relationship with them to really get a grasp and understanding of who and what their character is. Again, subjective, no objective, that is a good person, that is a bad person. You need rules for that, which goes into introverted thinking. No, it's not about rules, it's about a personal assessment of character. So yeah, that's what introverted feeling is about. And people who are introverted feeling oriented, because they act in line with their personal character, and because it's static, again, it's not meant to change, it's a set relationship. Introverted feeling types don't tend to treat people differently based on how they're feeling, based on their moods and emotions. Instead, they uphold the attitude, which is unchanging. That is someone I feel close to. That is my friend. I will treat that person like my friend. That person is not my friend. I'll be a bit more careful around them. I'll treat them more like an acquaintance rather than a friend. I might not confide so much in them as I will with this person and place my trust in this person more. This is more in line with introverted feeling. And that sort of desire to understand a person's character, very much in line with introverted feeling. Of course, because it's static, when it does change, if it changes completely. So rather than it being a case like with extroverted feeling, oh, that person, they are acting like an arsehole, they are being an arsehole in their way, in their manner, and they need to correct their jerkish behaviour. They need to act in a way which is appropriate to our social environment. This is more of an extroverted feeling idea. Or they don't care enough, I need to make them care enough to do that. Introverted feeling doesn't view it that way. Introverted feeling instead says, right, my view of that person, if it were to change, they would be I'd have a different understanding of that person. That is a different person than I thought they were. So they may have invested a lot in someone, and they realise that person actually can't be trusted as much. They betrayed them. They let them down. My view of them is suddenly completely quite different. They are not actually this person. They are this person to me, not this person to me. That is very much an introverted feeling thing. This sort of static breaking and this need to rebuild this sense of who this person is to me, subjectively. So yeah. And as long as relationships stay the same, introverted feeling types can be very, very loyal. Very much about with their friends, each individual person. One-to-one personal connections rather than the group solidarity as well. If you were to, let's say, fall out with a group, be socially ostracised, do something which gets you into trouble with everyone, more of an extroverted feeling thing and governed by introverted thinking rules, it is the introverted feeling person, the person who has a friendship with you, which isn't dependent on the group acceptability, who's going to go and talk to you individually and stand by you because you're their friend. And that is a personal connection, which is not based on any rules or structures or based on any group mood or emotion. That's introverted feeling. What I will say, introverted feeling is the opposite of introverted thinking. It's the opposite, because introverted thinking is impersonal in its structures. Introverted thinking will come up with a rule to apply across, right? And that's justice. Introverted thinking is very much about what's just, what is fair, what is coherent, consistent, right? So that means, right, same rule applies to everyone. Doesn't matter circumstances. You did this, you get the punishment, whatever it is. Introverted feeling is not like that. Introverted feeling is about each person is different. So when it applies a rule, it doesn't feel comfortable doing that. It's not going to want to apply the rule. It's going to want to understand the individual and their circumstances and the person's intentions behind why they did the thing. And then they may come to a view in terms of how a person ought to be punished, if at all. That's the introverted feeling way. You get to know the person, you form the relationship, and from that decides how you treat them. Not the same rule for everyone. And that leads to criticisms, because it means introverted feeling types can have favourites. They can be very partial rather than impartial. Introverted thinking is the impartial element. Introverted feeling is the partial element. They are deliberately partial. They have their favourites. They have their best friends. They have the people they want to give things to because they like them, and those people they don't like so much they won't do the same things for. That is introverted feeling. So yeah, that is what it's about. Also, as introverted feeling is different to extroverted feeling, one's moods and emotions. Introverted feeling is the set attitudes. Introverted feeling also complements extroverted thinking. These are not about clarity. These are not about digitizing information to transmit across large groups of people. It is far more about information delivered on the one-to-one in circumstance. So both extroverted thinking and introverted feeling are mindful of circumstance. And you'll find that for extroverted thinking, it's very much about how can I apply this? How can I improve and how things work? But what that misses is a sense of someone's intentions. Why someone's doing what they're doing. Do they have good character? Is a good intention leading them to do these things effectively? And people who are very focused on how things work, they benefit from people who have a clear sense of people's intentions in terms of, are you doing things for the right reasons? Do you have a good soul behind what you're doing effectively? And the same way introverted feeling, to really be able to exercise your good intentions, your sense of what is a good person or a bad person, you need to have skills, you need to have practicalities and methodologies to do that effectively, to exercise your competence of extroverted thinking with good intentions driving it. So introverted feeling, extroverted thinking, they work together very well. People who are introverted feeling oriented and extroverted thinking, they go together very well. So, yeah, that is introverted feeling. I hope that helped.